Hi, everyone. You are watching Passion Project, and I'm your host, Cat Margulis. And today, on today's show, we have Bianca Marais. She's the author of two novels, Hum If You Don't Know the Words, and If You Want to Make God Laugh. Bianca also teaches creative writing and is the host of the brilliant podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. So welcome, Bianca. Nice to see you.
You too, Kat. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I have been binging on your podcast. We have so much to chat about with writing. But first I want to talk about your books because right now I'm reading Hum If You Don't Know the Words, and it is so wonderful. I feel like I'm so engaged with the characters, and I'm also learning so much about South Africa. So the book is about a 10-year-old white girl and an African woman whose daughter goes missing, and they're brought together by tragedy during the Soweto uprising. It's set in apartheid era South Africa, and you yourself were born in South Africa. You were born and raised there, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And so I wanted to know, how did that experience impact you as a writer and the stories that you choose to tell?
Yeah, before I launch in, I just want to explain to everybody that the fan is because my office is super hot and I'm having hot flushes. So this is now the setup, but I am digging it. I always want to do,
You look fabulous.
So that's to explain that. Yes, so very much so. I feel like most writers, in terms of their life experiences, will inform their novels. So even if the novels are not autobiographical, certainly for the most part we write what we know. We write about the things that we're super passionate about and the things that keep us awake at night. And certainly growing up in South Africa during that time, there were a lot of experiences that I had and that I witnessed other people having that certainly shaped who I was. And these were things that I wanted to explore. I did it in both of my novels, in Hum If You Don't Know the Words and If You Want to Make God Laugh.
Yeah. And I tell you, to me, it reads like a biography. Like, I can't tell the difference between what might have been your real experience and what is the character's experience. It really feels so realistic. And I'm so invested in the characters, and they've really come alive for me. How much, I don't know, without giving too much away, how much of the book is you? How much is fiction? And where do you draw the line?
Yeah, so the whole historical backdrop is true. Yeah. So South Africa had the Soweto uprisings in 1976, and that was a huge catalyst that led to the disbanding of apartheid eventually down the line. So I wanted to set this tumultuous background to what the tumultuous experiences these characters were having. So the whole historical backdrop was true. In terms of the plot, that was entirely fictionalized. The young girl, her parents are murdered on the day of the Soweto uprising. She has to go live with an irresponsible aunt. And there's another character, Beauty, whose daughter goes missing on the day of the Soweto uprising because she's one of the organizers. And this is what happened during that time. Many Black people just went missing and nobody ever knew what happened to them. But I did draw a lot from my own personal life experiences. There's moments in the book, certainly the little white girl, Robin, there's moments where she's extremely bratty and privileged. And this little white child who just thinks, the whole world is set up around her. I say to people that when you were raised as a child during apartheid, you were largely brainwashed to see the world in this white-centric way. You were told that you were this exalted race and Black people, were less than. And so there are many moments where Robin portrays that outlook because this is what she's been taught. And then, of course, her journey is as she starts to unpack this and realize that this is a lie. Pretty much everything she's been told is a lie. And she comes to grips, with her inherent racism as she forms an amazing relationship with this Black woman who's searching for her child and who becomes Robin's caretaker.
Yeah, I just don't want to give so much away, but it's so brilliant. It's so amazingly written. And you do have these very complicated characters because you feel for Robin, you feel for her parents, and yet you see the racism in the ways that they're being. So it's really complicated. It's wonderful. And I love that you mention you kind of were beginning to touch on own voices. So I'd love to chat about that. So I think you probably wrote this book before Own Voices became, a hashtag or a thing. And it's got so much traction right now. And I'm wondering, would you write this book right now? And how do you navigate writing about other people's perspective in this new time and place we find as writers?
Yeah, so Own Voices wasn't a thing when I started writing this, which was in 2012. That became a hashtag later, but certainly we were having conversations about appropriation. And I was very aware of these conversations. And so I tried to write this book from just Robin's perspective. And of course, the whole book fell flat because all you had was a very privileged, very bratty little white child. And where I find fascination in stories is in a 360-degree view of a story, because what fascinates me is you can have two people standing right next to each other, but they live worlds and worlds apart. And I wanted to show that, how different these things were. And so when I started writing Beauty, I made a promise to myself that I would do it with great respect, great humility, understanding that to write a Black woman who has lived a whole life being oppressed through apartheid is not an experience I can understand personally. But I spent 10 years in Soweto working with HIV/AIDS orphans and their caregivers. And so many of these women poured their stories into me because they had this sense of time running out. And they wanted to leave a legacy. They didn't want to feel like their stories would end with them. So I also, from then on, felt a responsibility to tell their stories. And so I try to find a balance between the two. But what I did was I got sensitivity readers. I hired Black sensitivity readers. I consulted cultural experts in the Xhosa culture, which is what beauty is. And I was very much guided for them. And here's the thing, I made a lot of mistakes in terms of the culture, in terms of representing, the way that beauty would have lived. And I was so incredibly lucky because the people who I consulted steered me right, said, this is where you're going wrong. And when the book was finished, amazing feedback I got from, Black South Africans, Black writers in South Africa, is they said, you did the culture and you did this character justice without stereotyping her. And that was the most important thing for me. And just to answer, the rest of your question, in my second novel, once again, I wrote from a young Black character's perspective. Zodwa is one of the narrators. And again, that was kind of a tribute to the woman that I spent time with in Soweto. But going forward, definitely, I will never again write from a Black character's perspective. And that's mostly because, I have spoken to Black authors in South Africa who are extremely frustrated that they are telling these stories and they're being published in South Africa, but not internationally. And so my focus now is to try and get these stories published internationally so that, Black authors are telling their own experience of growing up in South Africa.
I love so much of that. I love the different kind of research that you embarked on to write a story like this, and to write it authentically and honestly and compassionately. And I also love what you're doing. So you've created an initiative that empowers Black women in Africa to write and publish their own stories. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so that was taking off wonderfully before COVID. And then, of course, COVID just put slammed anchors on everything across the world. And so, my focus now through my initiative, the Eunice Ngogodo initiative, that was my childhood caregiver. She turned 98 last month. She's still a huge part of my life. And so this initiative was started in her name to help young Black writers. For now, that's been put on hold because, there are people in Soweto who just do not have food at the moment. And of course, that is our greatest focus right now. But once things get better, we're going back to that. And, we wanting to bring young women up through the ranks, set them up with mentors, teach them creative writing, give them the resources that they need in order to tell their stories, and then put these stories in front of publishers so that they can get published. So, we got 2 or 3 young women through the initiative 2 years ago. where we set up a residency and we funded their residency there so that they could take time off from their normal lives to focus on their writing. And that's what we're hoping to get back to as well. And then at the moment, there's another project that I'm working on that I can't say too much about, but trying to bridge a gap between a South African publisher, an indie publisher, and a Canadian indie publisher so that we can get these stories here into a wider market.
I love it. That is so beautiful. It's beautiful that you're doing that and your generosity, and that you're the perfect person to be this intermediary, liaison and bringing that out and sharing it with the world. So thank you for that. And so your books are amazing. They're so well written. They're so important. And the stories that you're telling and that we get to learn from. To me, it seems obvious that publishers, editors, and agents would be dying to work with you and get your book out. How was your journey to publishing, and was it that easy?
Yeah, no, it was not. But, so few people's are. And I say to people that I got published ahead of a whole bunch of people that I was in writing classes with, not because I was more talented than they were, certainly, definitely not, but just because I was a bit more stubborn. And because I believed in this book so much. This book was a love letter to my childhood caregiver. And it was a love letter to these women in Soweto who just taught me how women are the backbone of Africa. Mm. And prior to writing Hum, If You Don't Know the Words, I wrote 2 other novels that were widely rejected by everybody. And at the time I was devastated, but I'm so glad because they were awful. They were so bad. And I feel like we need these test run books. It's these books that we write and then we learn what not to do so that when we tackle something that we are really passionate about, we put all of that learning into it. And then even this book was rejected more than 100 times by publishers. Wow. But this original story spanned 4 decades. I was overly ambitious with it. And they came back and they said, oh, we like it, but we, could you pick one period of time? And so a book that spanned 4 decades became a book that was 1 year, 3 months. Wow. I took out 60,000 words, which is 3/4 of the novel, and I started again. And I just was not prepared to give up on this book because it was so important to me. So it was not an easy path to publication by any means.
I love that you brought up the timing, because the timing is blowing my mind from a technical writing standpoint. It is just like, it's like a jazz band playing together. You know what I mean? And they're so in sync with each other. So that was not in your original draft that you were sending out, because that was spanning decades. Where did you hone that timing?
Yeah, so I just decided to look at, the most intense moments in these 2 characters' lives. So for Beauty, it's when her daughter went missing and she didn't know if her daughter was alive or dead and she had to go and search for her. And for Robin, it was when her parents died. So, they say as writers, we need to torture our characters and we kind of need to put them in a pressure cooker and show all these terrible things happening to them. It's like a crucible, they've got to go through this and come out different and changed on the other side. And what both of my novels are about as well is, as white people coming to grips with our own inherent racism and our own privilege. And so these were the best times, this particular year and 3 months was the best time to show Robin doing that. And to show Beauty's courage and her fortitude, to be a woman who is oppressed during a regime like this and to get out of bed every day and do the best you can for your children while your own government is systematically kind of oppressing you and creating laws to legally be racist against you. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. So that's how I chose that particular period of time.
Yeah. And so, when did it happen? Was it when you got your agent? Was it when you started working with the editor? What was the process in transforming the book to what it became?
Right. So I first wrote the book in about a year, and then I went to try and find an agent. And I was incredibly lucky that happened very, very quickly. I say to my listeners and my students that so much of this is luck. I would hate to think of how many amazing, amazing books are languishing in drawers or on files on laptops somewhere just because people didn't have the luck and therefore thought they weren't talented enough. But I sent it to my agent at that time, Cassandra Rogers, and she happened to read it very quickly and she offered me representation quickly, but she said we needed to work on the book. And so we worked on it together for quite a few months. Then it went out. Then we got a ton of these rejections. And then I looked at all of these rejections and I said, okay, where are the common issues? What are the things people are struggling with? And then I rewrote the book again. There were some things that I was not prepared to change. And this is also something I say to writers. You are the author of the work. You are the best person to know what this book is about. And I had some editors say to me, the racism in your novels is enough. Could you take out the homophobia and could you take out the anti-Semitism? And I said no, because to do that, I would not have faithfully represented South Africa at that time. And the apartheid government was a very us versus them regime. And I wanted to show the experience of so many South Africans. So while I took out 60,000 words, there were some things that I fought for. And then we went out on submission again and we got a lot of rejections again. And then kind of at, the last minute, we got an offer from Kerry Colin at Putnam, who was the best editor for it. She just fell in love with it. She saw what I was trying to do. And then I had to rewrite again because she said to me, your setting needs to become a character in this book. North Americans are not familiar with the setting. And she did kind of the opposite of what most editors do. Most editors say, take out 10,000 or 20,000 words. And she said, you need to add like 10,000 words to make the setting come alive. And so the book was rewritten again. And that was, it was probably 3 years from start to finish.
Wow. Amazing. And I love that on your podcast, you ask these questions of everybody. It is so juicy listening to everybody's journey and like the backstory to the overnight, what looks like to be the overnight success, but you hear the whole background of it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like social media. We see this snapshot of a person's life and we go, oh, this person's life is perfect. And look at their success and look at all their wonderful things. But nobody shows, all the hard work and the crying and the pulling out your hair and the tears and the frustration that goes into it. And that's what I find fascinating, that every author's journey to publication is different. Our processes are all different. And, it's a contradiction that as writers, we are incredibly sensitive people. We have to be in order to explore the human condition the way we do. But being that sensitive is really hard when it means you get constant rejection. And it's easy to give up. And I don't want writers to give up. And that's why I started the podcast, was to kind of just share that knowledge and say to them, just keep getting better and just keep going.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love the backstories. There are also amazing must listen to episodes like, about the like the genre, how to write this and how to write that. And, understanding more of what happens behind the scenes in the business. So I am so grateful and thankful that you've been putting out that and sharing that with everybody. And I recommend it to all writers. You've got to watch this podcast. But you also teach creative writing. And, you're an amazing writer and you've come so far, as I'm hearing, in your own journey. What are some mistakes that you see time and time again, or what would you go back and tell yourself if you wanted to like speed up the process or something?
Yeah, I feel like as beginner writers, because there's so much that we don't know, we are hugely overly ambitious with our beginning sort of projects, which makes it extremely, extremely difficult for us. And I know a lot of emerging writers just sit down and write, because what happens is we as writers are first and foremost readers. And so we will read this polished novel and go, wow, this is amazing. And we forget that the writer makes it look so easy because they know their craft so well. And so we go, well, how difficult can this be? It can't be that difficult. And we sit down and write. And that's what I do with my first two novels. I never studied creative writing. I was, ferocious reader, and I studied like English literature. So I thought, okay, that meant I could write. And so I just sat down and I made every mistake, like an unlikable protagonist that wasn't even relatable, that was just awful. I didn't have a structure. It was just a mess. And so the most important thing I did was then study creative writing. I said to myself, okay, this is nonsense. I'm floundering in the dark here. Let me go and learn my craft. And so it's been like almost 10 years of learning and honing my craft. And that's something I say to writers. You cannot make magic happen with a novel unless you understand things like structure and plotting and outlining. And I am a pantser, so I don't even plot. But I know how to plot if I need to. I know how to make a character come alive. I know the difference between showing and telling. And this is something many emerging writers don't know. They sit down and tell a story as though it were their journal. And they don't dramatize scenes. They don't make something come alive for the reader. There's perhaps not enough conflict in the novel, and conflict is many things. It's not, people shooting bullets at someone and they ducking and diving. Conflict can be internal. It could be our own internal struggles. It's our interpersonal struggles, etc. So, there are so many elements of craft. And I've been studying this now for 10 years. And every single podcast episode, I learn something new that I didn't know before. And I've published 2 novels and I teach writing, and yet I am constantly learning. And so this is something that I say to writers: learn your craft, master your craft. Too many writers just write something and then they send it out to agents. Agents say that their busiest time for getting submissions is December, because that's straight after NaNoWriMo. So, someone will sit in November and write a novel in 1 month, and then they send it out to agents. And yes, finishing a novel is huge. It's amazing. Yes. Like, crack open that bottle of champagne and celebrate it, but then put that book aside, start something else, come back to it, and the magic happens in the rewrites. That's when you really start restructuring a novel, seeing where you went wrong, rewriting, and just polishing. And, that patience is the thing that I would say to my younger self, because I did that. I wrote a novel and then I sent it out to agents, and I didn't have critique partners. I didn't have writing groups. I didn't have anybody critiquing my work so that I could make it better. And that is incredibly important. Find other writers, find people who look at your work and can look at it with a discerning eye, who know what you're trying to do and who want to help you make it better.
Oh, I love all of that. And you've spoken to this before, which is the persistence, the motivation, the stamina. How do you regenerate? How do you self-regenerate? And also through the rejection letters, like, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay disciplined to keep at it?
It's difficult. And I say to people, feel the hurt, feel the sting and the pain of that rejection. Because, I say to my students, if you are not nervous about getting critique when sending your work out to your writing group, then you haven't made yourself vulnerable. Like, as writers, they say the writing it's easy. It's just opening a vein and bleeding onto the page. Easy, right? But it is so hard, because you make yourself incredibly vulnerable. And then when people critique that, of course it's going to hurt. Of course it's going to sting. And when people reject that, of course it's devastating. And I say, be devastated, rail against it, mutter darkly, shake your fist at the heavens and at these agents and at these editors, and then sit down and see what the feedback is. And when it's not hurting so much anymore, look at it objectively and keep saying to yourself, okay, where did I go wrong? How can I fix this? How can I make it better? Because that should always be the goal. And I always say, write something that you're incredibly passionate about. Find themes in your work that really matter to you, whether it's the patriarchy, whether it's misogyny, whether it's whatever it is, it needs to be something you feel passionate about, because that's what's going to keep getting you back, bum in the chair, through all the rejections, through all the hurt, and taking out 60,000 words and going, okay, well, that was, that felt like a waste of time, but that was a learning curve. And now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it again. It's being passionate about it and saying, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what matters to me. And so I'm not going to give up on it.
Oh, I love that. I really love the vulnerable piece with the feedback. That means you're doing it right. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, you've got, you've completed those 2 books. They're incredible. Everybody gets to read them. You have the podcast everybody gets to listen to, and you're also teaching writing and doing all these amazing works, empowering women abroad. What else? What next?
That's quite a bit. It's I also, there's things in South Africa that I'm still very much involved with. I do a lot of fundraising for there, and there's a business there that I'm also involved with. For now, what I really want to focus on is the podcast and my writing. I spent, I'm just like other writers out there, even knowing as much as I do, I spent 2 years writing a novel that I had to make a decision kind of 6 months ago to just shelve after 2 years and to say, okay, this is not going to get published. It hurts like crazy. It's frustrating as all hell, but I'm setting that aside. And now I am almost finished another novel, and that's kind of my focus now that I'm busy on. And the teaching I'm really, really passionate about, and the podcast I'm super, super passionate about, because, when you teach people, you can only teach a handful of people at a time. But with a podcast, you've got global reach. People can be listening to those episodes at different times. And there's so many experts, there's so many people that I'm reaching out to constantly going, please, will you speak on my podcast? Because I love your work. I love what you do. So the podcast will definitely take a lot more of my focus going forward as well.
Yeah. Oh, I hope it does. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it all. I can't wait for the next book, but I still get to finish this one and read the next one because they're amazing. And thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kat. Thank you so much for having me on and for interviewing me, because I usually interview other people, so it felt a bit weird, but it was good.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for watching. This was Passion Project, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.